Hello, I'm Annette of AB Physiotherapy Services for Horses and Riders. It's 5 years since I completed my Masters in Veterinary Physiotherapy. To celebrate, I've created this free video for you about my Masters research project. As a student, I noticed a lot of horses had trigger points under their bellies. So for my research project, I looked into this and seeing if there was any relationship to girthy behaviour. In this video, I'm going to take you through a bit of background, the setup and results of my research, and finish with discussing some practical things you can do to help reduce girthy behaviour in your horse. If you want to read the full details of my project, it is published in the Journal of Equine Veterinary Science. A myofascial trigger point is a painful, harder than normal bundle of contracted muscle fibres and inflammatory mediators. The 4 key characteristics of a trigger point are a taut band, hypersensitivity, referred pain, and a local twitch response. There are a lot of theories on what causes trigger points, but it's thought stresses to the muscle like compression, poor posture, and making it work hard are contributing factors. Trigger points can be found by feeling the muscle. Research shows that the more severe the trigger point, the more accurate we are at detecting them, and trained therapists have a precision for locating trigger points down to the width of their fingertip. If you press around between your shoulder blade and your neck, you'll probably find a few yourself. Girthiness is any negative behavioural response to the girth being fastened. The cutaneous trunci is a thin muscle covering the side of the horse. Its function is to twitch in response to flies, insects, or other irritants landing on the skin. It is sometimes called the fly twitch muscle. Another researcher's study into cutaneous trunci suggests girthiness arises from either the girth constantly stimulating the twitch or in response to pain caused by compression of the muscles beneath the saddle and girth. Okay, anatomy. Horses have 4 pectoral muscles on each side of their chest, whereas we only have 2. Horses also don't have a collarbone, so the pectoral muscles are an important part of the sling that stabilises the trunk and front legs, as well as helping move the front legs forwards, backwards and sideways underneath the body, such as in lateral work. In this side-on picture, the forelimb has been removed, and this picture is as if we're lying on the ground looking up at the horse's belly. So in orange, we have the superficial pectoral here and here. In green, we have the cranial deep pectoral running around the front of the scapula here and here. In purple, we have the posterior pectoral, which travels all the way back here, shaped like a waistcoat. And in yellow, we have the transverse pectoral, which runs down into the foreleg. Because the pecs are on the underside of the body, we tend not to look at them and they get forgotten about. Until I started my research, I for one didn't realise just how big these muscles are. So we've got the superficial pectoral beautifully delineated up the front here. Then we have the diamond-shaped transverse pectoral through here. We have the waistcoat-shaped ascending pectoral down here. And on this one you can see, or you can just make out, the cutaneous trunci where it overlies the ascending pectoral. For my research, I focused on transverse and ascending pectoral, as the girth would lie directly on top of these muscles. My research project aimed to locate and map where trigger points typically occur in the transverse and ascending pectoral muscles, to score the severity of trigger points by behavioural reaction to palpation, and to look for associations between these findings and girth aversion behaviour. I pilot tested and refined a map of the pectorals, dividing it into cells. Then for a few months I collected data from horses that came to me for routine physiotherapy. I had a list of in- and exclusion criteria and ended up with 38 study participants. The horses were assessed and treated as normal, plus recording my findings onto the map. For each cell, I recorded if there was a trigger point and scored how severe it was. To score the severity, I watched for local, facial and behavioural reactions, such as a twitch or spasm, and wrinkling the nose, holding the breath, ears back, clenching the lips, staring or puckering the eyes, as well as turning the head, stamping or lifting a leg, swishing the tail, trying to move away from the pressure, all the way through to biting and kicking, which some horses did. I scored them from 0 to 3, being normal, mild, moderate or severe pain reaction. I transferred all the data onto the computer and ran a heap of statistics. The horses in the study were a variety of ages, heights and breeds, with a variety of saddles and girths used. I collected a lot of data and tested each for a relationship between it and girthiness, or between it and trigger point severity. Much of it wasn't statistically significant. My primary objective was to locate and map the trigger points and score their severity. This map shows the combined data for all horses. The shading represents the average severity of the trigger points. White is mild, light grey is moderate, and dark grey is severe. The overlaid number is the percentage of horses that had a trigger point in that cell. You can see areas where trigger points occurred with a higher frequency also had a higher severity. The most common location for trigger points was in the armpit or axillary portion of ascending pectoral, which was present in about 95% of horses. 87% of horses had moderate trigger points to the right of the sternum in the girth region, and trigger points were common all along the girth line. The girth doesn't overlie the armpit area. However, the girth could have a tethering effect over the middle of the muscle, restricting its ability to lengthen. A bit like a heavy bag on your shoulder might give you neck pain. Trigger points were common to the right of the sternum. This may be related to laterality or the natural crookedness of horses. Many equine handling practices, including mounting, are one-sided. This may be a factor contributing to asymmetrical trigger points. It is an English riding convention to fasten the girth on the left. This could pull the skin and pectoral muscles towards the left, bunching and pinching them against the right side of the sternum or breastbone. The cutaneous trunci or fly twitch muscle I mentioned earlier lies over the lateral edge of ascending pectoral muscle, which was another common site for trigger points. This is the thickest part of cutaneous trunci. Stretching the foreleg forward may help relax the cutaneous trunci and lessen irritation or twitching response. The possible benefits of stretching would be better assessed with a different type of study. There is some moderate evidence in humans that stretching decreases trigger point pain. There were a large number of trigger points across the girth line, with horses having more severe trigger points in the region behind the elbow. This is similar to where Fairfax recorded the highest pressure under normal girths. Compression from the girth could hamper the muscle's ability to function. Fairfax assessed pressure and performance in horses ridden in a normal girth and then in the Fairfax girth. The Fairfax girth, which is cut back around the elbow, was found to allow an increase in stride length and increased hock and knee flexion when compared to a normal girth. They attributed these changes in limb movement to the girth recording lower pressures, but it may also partly be due to decreased contact over trigger points. It would be interesting to investigate if long-term use of a cutback girth decreases trigger point severity in these locations, and in turn if that would decrease girthy behaviour. When converted to girth aversion scores, 25 horses were classified as not girthy and 13 horses were considered girthy. The most common behaviour associated with fastening the girth was looking at the girth, which 50% of horses did, followed by 42% who blew out or held their breath, with the next most common being cribbing, then tail swishing, flattening the ears, moving away and attempting to bite, with kicking and pawing being the least common on 5%. There was a statistically significant difference in trigger point severity between horses classified as girthy or not girthy. In the table, you can see there is a trend for girthy horses to have moderate or severe trigger points, and for not girthy horses to have mild or moderate trigger points. This is perhaps best seen in the maps. where the Girthy horses had higher severity scores and darker shading. In fact, 95% of the time, Girthy horses scored an average severity equal to or greater than non-Girthy horses. So Girthy horses had more trigger points and more pain. Trigger points are painful both spontaneously and when palpated. The presence of trigger points in muscles in the girth area offers an explanation for negative behaviour on fastening the girth. As horse owners, we often attribute behaviour to reasons other than pain, such as ill will or bad attitude. And hiding pain is a survival mechanism for prey animals. However, when horses are restrained, aggressive behaviour is strongly associated with pain. How often do we hear people say, "He's just being naughty," when actually the horse is non-verbally saying, "Ouch!" Girthy behaviour can be dangerous for handlers, especially children. We should all be more aware that girthy behaviour is associated with trigger points, and therefore horses may be expressing genuine musculoskeletal pain. Rather than punishing the horse for communicating pain, it would be better for the horse and handler if the source of pain is identified and addressed. My project only sampled data at one time point, so it cannot be said that trigger points are causing girthy behaviour, just that both are present in these horses. We have correlation, not causation. There may be another factor causing both. For example, poor saddle fit, back pain, or stomach ulcers. The conclusions that can be drawn from my project are that trigger points are very common in ridden horses, up in the armpit area and through the girth region, and that girthy horses had a larger number and more severe trigger points than non-girthy horses. So, what can we do to prevent girthiness? And if you have a girthy horse, what can you do about it? I've divided it into 3 areas. So you can 1. Remove the causes and prevent it developing. 2. You can settle the symptoms to get rid of the pain. And 3. You can retrain the behaviour. Okay, removing the causes. So if your horse is showing other signs, then you need to rule out other things. Another study found that of horses presenting to the vet with girthy behaviour, 1/3 of them were found to have ulcers. So if your horse is showing signs of ulcers, then there's plenty that you can do to treat and prevent that, and that's something you would need to look into first. Likewise, if your horse is showing signs of back pain, so if there are other behavioural changes and it's tender or it's dipping or there's muscle atrophy, then that's something that you need to get treated as well. So there's heaps on back pain and ulcers. They're probably enough for talks on another day, so I'm not going to go into that. In terms of the basic, straightforward so the biggest cause of girthy behaviour is saddle fit. I'm not going to go into how to fit a saddle, I'm just going to say it is important. And there can be a big difference between a basic fit and a better fit. If you think of a scale 0 to 10, and 0 is awful, it doesn't fit anywhere, and 10 is perfect, most horses will go along okay in a basic 6 or 7 out of 10 fit, but others will continue to be unhappy until you get a saddle that is a 8, 9, 10 out of 10 perfect fit. Same as some people can run in basic Dunlop sneakers, but others need Asics and orthotics to run without foot pain. And it can take a lot of hard work to get a really good saddle fit. The UK Saddle Research Trust recently said you can expect to have to try on 20 to 25 saddles before you find the right one. So if you have a girthy horse, saddle fit is really important. Take the time to get it right. Girth fit. I would recommend a shaped girth that is cut back around the elbow and a long girth that does up higher under the saddle flap. I often find quite a lot of tenderness and probably bruising on horses that have short girths. The girth should be fairly wide to spread the pressure out, and it should have soft edges. A wool fleece sleeve can sometimes be useful for this. And don't do the girth up ridiculously tight. If your saddle slips, you should be looking at saddle fit or using a breastplate or a crupper rather than over tightening the girth. Elastic makes a girth easier to do up, but if you're pulling it up so tight that it no longer has any give, then it's not functioning as elastic. Russell Guire did some research into elastic girths with racehorses, and they found that tight girths had a negative effect on the horse's ability to breathe and their run to fatigue time. Do the girth up slowly. Do it up loosely to start with, so it's just touching the skin. Then gradually tighten it on the left and right, one hole at a time. If you pull the girth up several holes in one go, that's quite a lot of skin and muscle that can move and could get pinched. Warming the muscles first could also make it more comfortable, and that doesn't have to be complicated. You could warm them by grooming the horse, by walking, by sitting your hand on that area for a little while. Once the girth is done up, walk the horse a little bit, from where you've saddled out to the arena or where you're going to ride. You can then stretch the legs forward to make sure the hair and skin are smooth around the elbow. Once you have mounted, your body weight will compress the saddle and saddle cloth a little bit, and you can get that last hole with less effort. We should also be trying to mount from both sides. Settling the symptoms. So as physiotherapists, we can release the trigger points and develop a plan to restore whole body balance and function. But the trigger points will recur if the factor that caused them to develop isn't addressed. In horses that are girthy, there are often issues with the ribs, wither, lower neck, thoracic spine, and any of the muscles, joints, nerves, and fascia over the trunk. Horses are masters of compensation, so we need to address the whole musculoskeletal system. If you have addressed all the above factors, you will hopefully find that they are tolerating the girth better. But if your horse is still being girthy, you need to work on retraining their behaviour whilst being saddled up and girthed. Extinguishing an undesirable behaviour is much harder than teaching a new behaviour. So ideally, we want to avoid girthy behaviour in the first place. And this is where gradually doing the girth up is so important. Do not punish your horse for showing girthy behaviour by growling or slapping them, because remember, when a horse is restrained and he can't escape, if you're inflicting pain, he's more likely to become aggressive. So learn to read your horse's body language. Don't wait until they're trying to kick and bite you. Watch for the nostrils flaring or them turning their head away, or trying to move away. Those sorts of behaviours. You need to wait until they are comfortable with each step of saddling and girthing before you proceed to the next one. Same as if you are training them to go into water. You don't rush them at it all at once and force them to go through scared. You would go slowly, one step at a time, allowing your horse to get comfortable at each point along the way. So approach doing the girth up in the same way. Go slowly, positively reward any tiny step in the right direction, wait until they are comfortable, and don't force it on them. Warwick Schiller, I believe, has a video on YouTube where he uses a process like I've described with a horse that was very nippy and agitated during girthing, and he goes very slowly and the behaviours gradually decline. Overshadowing is a training technique where you ask the horse to perform an already established response instead of the undesirable behaviour. So instead of telling the horse off, you're redirecting them to do something else and then rewarding them when they do what you've asked. So if your horse is trying to bite you or nip you, you could ask them to lower their head instead. Or if they are trying to kick you or move away, you could ask them to step back and park, to reinforce staying parked with the head lowered whilst you do the girth up. So good luck with retraining that behaviour. And remember that we are only retraining the behaviour once we are sure that there is no longer any pain or saddle fit issues causing the behaviour. So we only retrain once we know there's no pain and it's safe to do so. Thank you for listening. I hope you found some useful or interesting snippets in there. If you'd like to know more about physiotherapy for horses and riders, you can check out the blogs on my website, abphysioforhorseandrider.com, or you can follow me on Facebook for news and inspiration and updates. Thank you. Bye.